the Big 12 in women's basketball has released like the days for the conference games, but we don't know the times or the stations or anything like that. Just the days, and I'm going to go over that. And I'm going to put that in the description below so y'all can see it. December 30th are the following games. Baylor at Texas, which is probably the most intriguing matchup to begin with. After all, both these teams are the top two teams in the Big 12, in my opinion, going into this season. BYU at TCU, Iowa State at Oklahoma State, Kansas State at Cincinnati, Texas Tech at Houston, UCF at Oklahoma, West Virginia at Kansas, January 3rd. Cincinnati at West Virginia, Houston at Kansas State, Kansas at Iowa State, Oklahoma at BYU, Oklahoma State at UCF, TCU at Baylor, Texas at Texas Tech, January 6th. Cincinnati at Oklahoma, Houston at Baylor, Iowa State at BYU, Kansas at Texas Tech, Kansas State at UCF, Oklahoma State at TCU, Texas at West Virginia. And by the way, Baylor will have a new basketball arena by that time when they first home game of the year, so of the conference, when they get to play TCU. So I'm not sure I went over January 6th. If I did already do that, I apologize on that. Cincinnati, Oklahoma, Houston at Baylor, Iowa State at BYU, Kansas at Texas Tech, Kansas State at UCF, Oklahoma State at TCU, Texas at West Virginia. January 10th, Baylor at Kansas, BYU at Houston, Oklahoma at Kansas State, TCU at Texas, Texas Tech at Oklahoma State, UCF at Cincinnati, West Virginia at Iowa State. January 13th are the following games. Baylor at Iowa State, Cincinnati at BYU, Oklahoma State at Kansas, TCU at Houston, Texas at Kansas State, Texas Tech at Oklahoma, West Virginia at UCF. January 16th, Kansas at Texas. January 17th, BYU at Oklahoma State. Houston at West Virginia, Iowa State at Texas Tech, Kansas State at TCU. January 20th, Kansas at Kansas State, Oklahoma at Houston, TCU at Iowa State, Texas at Oklahoma State, Texas Tech at BYU, UCF at Baylor, West Virginia at Cincinnati. January 22nd, Kansas State at Baylor. January 23rd, UCF at TCU. January 24th, Houston at Texas Tech, Iowa State at Kansas, Oklahoma at Texas, Oklahoma State at Cincinnati. January 27th, BYU at Kansas State, Cincinnati at Texas, Houston at UCF, Iowa State at West Virginia, Kansas at Oklahoma, TCU at Texas Tech. January 28th, Baylor at Oklahoma State. January 30th, Cincinnati at Houston, UCF at West Virginia. January 31st, BYU at Kansas, Kansas State at Oklahoma, Oklahoma State at Iowa State. February 1st, Texas at Baylor. Another intriguing game, obviously. February 3rd, Iowa State at UCF, Kansas at TCU, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State, Texas Tech at Cincinnati, West Virginia at BYU. February 4th, Baylor at Houston, Kansas State at Texas. February 6th, Texas Tech at West Virginia. February 7th, Baylor at BYU, Cincinnati at UCF, TCU at Oklahoma. February 10th, BYU at Cincinnati, Houston at Kansas, Oklahoma at Iowa State, Oklahoma State at Kansas State, Texas at TCU, UCF at Texas Tech, West Virginia at Baylor. February 13th, BYU at UCF, West Virginia at TCU. February 14th, Baylor at Oklahoma, Cincinnati at Kansas, Kansas State at Iowa State, Oklahoma State at Texas Tech, Texas at Houston. February 17th, Houston at Oklahoma State, Iowa State at Texas, Kansas at BYU, Oklahoma at West Virginia, TCU at Cincinnati, UCF at Kansas State. February 18th, Texas Tech at Baylor. February 20th, Oklahoma at Cincinnati. February 21st, Iowa State at Houston, Kansas at Baylor, TCU at BYU, Texas Tech at Texas, UCF at Oklahoma State, West Virginia at Kansas State. February 24th, Baylor at West Virginia, BYU at Iowa State, Cincinnati at Texas Tech, Houston at TCU, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma, Texas at UCF. February 25th, Kansas State at Kansas. February 27th, Baylor at Cincinnati, West Virginia at Oklahoma State. February 28th, 8th, Houston at BYU, Iowa State at Kansas State, Kansas at UCF, Texas at Oklahoma, Texas Tech at TCU. March 2nd, BYU at Texas, Cincinnati at Iowa State, Kansas State at Texas Tech, Oklahoma at Kansas, TCU at West Virginia, UCF at Houston. And March 3rd is only one game, and that's Oklahoma State at Baylor. I don't know how good the Big 12 is going to really be because Iowa State is rebuilding from last year, and I know it's way too early in the bracketology stuff, but they're not even projected to be in the NCAA tournament. But maybe they sneak in. Oklahoma State could be in the NCAA tournament too. Oklahoma State, Iowa State. I think Kansas State's going to be better than last year. Kansas could very well make the NCAA tournament too. Baylor and Texas obviously should. Obviously, but I'm not so sure about West Virginia because they have a new head coach. And I know TCU has a new head coach. Cincinnati has a new head coach. And UCF and BYU have second-year head coaches going into the league. And Oklahoma State, of course, has a second-year head coach too. So a lot of more than 3 years at a program. Obviously, Texas's coach, this is his 4th year at the program because his first year was 2020 to 2021, I believe, but I could be wrong about that. I definitely know Texas Tech is more. It's not so new, but you get the point. There are some like either first year head coaches or second year head coaches, and especially if for 3 of the 4 new schools coming into the conference have a newer head coach. Vic Schaefer is going to be in year 4 because he was like 2020 to 2020. His first season was like 2020 to 2021. So that's kind of what I thought on Vic Schaefer. And I just don't know how, like, some of those schools coming into the conference like Cincinnati and UCF were at the bottom of the American, and BYU was kind of still in rebuild after their longtime head coach resigned. And Houston was like one of the better teams in the league, but the American and women's basketball is not as good as the Big 12, and obviously West Coast Conference is not as good as the Big 12. I'm sorry, I just call it the way it is on that. It is what it is on that. So we'll have to wait and see how many teams we get down the line for the NCAA tournament. And I don't know, and Iowa State lost a lot of production from last year. They added some transfers, yes. But their best player, there's some of the better players left, either due to graduation or transferred out. So we'll see how good this conference is going to be, and especially in terms of top 25 teams too. There's only like 2 definite ones in Baylor and Texas, in my opinion. Oklahoma's lost 3 starters, including a few of the better all-time players. And of course, like I said, Iowa State, they were in the top 25 some last year, but they kind of disappointed. Yes, they won a conference tournament at all, but then they got lost in the first round. And now they have to replace a lot. And Oklahoma State had to replace some players too, not just due to graduation, but transfer portal as well. And West Virginia has a new head coach after they got a new head coach the year prior. So, yeah, it's not it's gonna not I don't know. It's not a situation where you'll want to be as a program for any of these schools with either a first year or second year head coach, especially when you're newer to the conference here. I mean, somewhat, because look, it is a step up for some of these coaches. I mean, from the West Coast Conference to the Big 12, the American to the Big 12. It's not even mentioning the West Virginia women's basketball coach came from Steno Falston. We'll have to wait and see down the line. And I know West Virginia was an NCAA tournament team last year, but will they be again this year? I don't know. So, anyways, if you like this content, like and subscribe. And see you guys later. 600 subscribers. We're on the road to it. Let's go. And that's the next goal now is 600. And so on and so forth.